Today, I want to look at how the global economy will collapse. Specifically, how the US economy will collapse because of this war. Now, the argument I want to make to you today is that financial collapse do not happen accidentally or naturally. It has to be engineered. And this is a very hard concept for us to understand, okay? So in economics, there's something called the boom-bust cycle. Which basically states that in capitalism, you have the economy booming, then suddenly, for whatever reason, it collapses, okay? It's called a boom-bust cycle. And the idea is that if you study economics, they teach you that this is just a natural part of capitalism because in good times, people spend too much money. They become overconfident. And so then they waste a lot of money and then it collapses. The economy turns bad. And so you have to focus on being more lean and efficient and resilient. So think of, gaining weight, okay? You gain too much weight and then you feel bad, so then you lose weight. And that's the idea of the boom-bust cycle. The problem, though, is that no one can explain properly how and why suddenly the bubble pops, okay? What is the mechanism or trigger for the collapse? If you study economics, you will never ever know the answer. So we are going to focus on speculation today, okay? So again, the internet knows this, but I've never studied economics. I don't know much about economics, but I'm curious as to why this happens, okay? Why is it that bubbles pop? How do economies rise and fall, okay? So I'm not an expert. I'm not even a professor. Yes, I understand. But what I do is I engage in speculation for fun, for entertainment, okay? So just see this as a fun class where we're gonna explore some fun topics that have no scholarly basis, okay? All right? So just keep this in mind, guys. All right, so let's look at very quickly the main explanation for why booms and busts happens. And this is from Andrew Ross Xueqin, who is probably the most influential financial journalist in America. And he wrote a book called 1929, which looks at the stock market collapse of 1929, and he offers a very good explanation as to why it happened. Okay, so Amber, could you read for me, please?
Of course. Lengthy, uninterrupted booms like the one in the 1920s produce a collective delusion. Optimism becomes a drug or a religion or some combination of both. People lose their ability to calculate risk and distinguish between good ideas and bad ones.
Okay, so again, this is a standard explanation for why there's a bubble burst, because it's delusional and then it's like you fly too high, okay? But you're not supposed to fly, so then you fall down to the ground eventually. It's just gravity, okay? The idea of gravity. But what I want to show you today is there's actually another explanation, which is this is all being engineered. There are people behind the scenes who have the power to cause economies to rise and to fall, okay? So let me give you an example of this. All right, let's just say you're a bank. All right, you're a bank. And your job is to take those money, save it, and then use it properly in order to promote the economy, okay? So let's just say we put $1 million into the bank, okay? And what does the bank do with it? The bank then lends it out to entrepreneurs, right? So maybe I want to start a restaurant, and so I borrow $1 million from the bank, okay? Question, how much money is in the bank now? It's a zero, right? Okay, that's just math, guys. Look, if I take in $1 million and I lend it out $1 million, I should have zero, because that's just basic math. But that's not the answer. The actual answer is $2 million. And what you need to understand is that each bank has the ability to print its own money. And the bank is a mechanism for liquidity in the economy, okay? And this is a great illusion. This is the delusion, okay? Behind the economy, where money is just an idea, it's a concept, it's a collective hallucination. All right? Now, but the problem is there are thousands, tens of thousands of banks everywhere. So how do they know how to coordinate together? Okay? And this is something else you need to understand about the system. There's actually something called a signaling mechanism. Okay? So all these banks are separate, but they are linked together into something called a central bank. Okay? A central bank. And what does the central bank do? The central bank signals whether or not to lend money or not to lend money. And this mechanism is called the interest rate. Okay? Now, again, if you study economics, what they will teach you is that depending on the interest rate, if it's low, maybe 1%, or 5%, or high 5%, then that will determine how consumers behave. If the interest rate is 1%, what this means is I can go to the bank, get money, and buy a house, right? If it's too high, 5%, then I don't want to go to the bank to buy a house. And this is what you're taught in economics class. But there's actually another explanation, which is the interest rate is not to signal consumers or homeowners to buy, but rather for banks to lend or not. Okay, does that make sense? Because the banks, what they can do is, depending on the interest rate, they know that, okay, my job is to release more liquidity into the system, release more money into the system, and therefore I will make it easier to take out a loan, okay? But if the interest rate is high, then I know, okay, I must not release too much liquidity in the system, therefore I will make the loan application hard, okay? So, in other words, the interest rate is not set in order to guide consumer behavior, it is set in order to coordinate liquidity in the marketplace. Okay, does that make sense? Okay, so these are two very curious aspects of this system that people don't really understand. So, in order to understand the system, I will explain to you how the world works, okay? And I explained this before, but I want to summarize and apply it to this scenario, okay? So, the first thing to understand is that we live in Plato's cave. Okay? Meaning that we're all chained to the floor and we're all watching a screen. And behind is this great fire where the elite create puppets so that we can collectively hallucinate our own reality. All right? And this mechanism that allows us to coordinate our imagination is, of course, called money. Right? So think of money as God, right? And so what money is doing is it's focusing our minds in a certain way that creates our reality. All right? So remember this idea and keep this in mind. Even though, in theory, the theory is that the goal of the bankers is to maintain the game, okay? That's all they care about. So they want to switch from America to China. But it didn't really work because China doesn't really want to take the responsibility of being the global reserve currency as well as having military bases overseas, all right? So China doesn't want to do this, and America won't let China do this. So your only option now is Israel, okay? And that's why I believe that this war in Iran, what it will do is shift the center of gravity from America to Israel. Because Israel wants to be the center of the world, not China. Okay, does that make sense, guys? All right, the other thing you have to understand is that for this to happen though, transnational capital needs to first collapse the American economy. And there are different ways they can do that, right? They can collapse the private credit bubble, they can collapse the AI bubble, they can collapse both at the same time. And why would they want to do that? Because as a banker, as transnational capital, you make your money through activity, right? When people go and do stuff, whether it's entrepreneurship or starting wars, but they have to go do stuff. And right now, America has a lot of problems, okay? So let's look at America's problems. First is aging, where the elite are now older and older. Therefore, they are less active, they are less energetic, they're less entrepreneurial, okay? Then you have something called quantitative easing, which is like too much money in the system. If you have too much money in the system, then people do stupid things like gamble, okay? All right? And the last problem of America is you can't win wars. Okay? Like this Iran situation is showing that the American military is not as strong as you think it is. So if you're transnational capital, you see these three things, okay? The population is getting too old. There's too much money around, so people will do stupid things like gambling. And the American military is not that great. Then you're going to shift your capital from America overseas, okay? But before you do that, what you want to do is engineer a financial crisis so that you can make as much money as possible, just like the 2008 financial crisis, okay? So we don't know when it will happen, but we can be sure that it will happen. It'll be suddenly, okay? Okay, does that make sense, guys? Now, you're like, wait a minute here. Why would Trump and the Americans allow this to happen? They must know this is coming. And the answer is because it is in the long-term best interest of America for the economy to collapse and for transnational capital to go elsewhere. And this is something we'll discuss next class, okay? What the long-term American strategy is. Transnational capital is leaving America, and then Americans are like, oh my God, Bank of England, City of London, these parasites are leaving? Thank you, get out of here, man, okay? And what will happen is, once they leave, America will plot a much brighter future. And it's something we'll discuss next class. But any questions? Yep.
So seems like that America is in a disadvantaged situation, but they know what they are doing and they're just sending parasites outside of their country and having a more long-term benefit. Is that right?
Okay, so this is something we'll discuss next class, okay? But this is not a deliberate strategy, all right? Because if you think about it, economic collapse will destroy a lot of wealth in America. It will probably create conditions for civil war in America. It will create a lot of pain. But there's certain people, for example, Donald Trump, who believe that this pain is necessary in order for America to become great again, okay? He said his motto is what? Make America great again. And how do you do that? You get rid of these parasites. But to get rid of parasites, guys, it's a painful process. It's like a cancer, right? Have you guys been through cancer treatment? It's painful. Chemotherapy, they do surgery on you. You have to like eat this, crappy food all the time. It's a painful process, okay? So transnational capital, it's a parasitic force, it's a cancer on the American host. They have to get rid of it, but it's gonna be a very painful process. That's gonna take a long time, years, possibly decades, okay? Yeah, Amber?
Thank you. So if transnational capital is leaving America, then how would you think this shift would impact the global economy? Or would it at all?
Yeah, okay. All right. Yeah, all right, so this is something we'll discuss later on, okay? But let me just show you how this shift happens. All right, so right now you're in America. And the best place for you to shift is Israel, okay? Why? Because you're interested in activity, okay? You're interested in putting your money in a place where it's gonna grow, right? And why is Israel growing? Well, because of the Greater Israel Project, right? They want to conquer the Middle East, but then it has to rebuild, right? After the war, rebuilding. And then what it's going to do is become the hub of global trade, right? Because Israel controls Africa. And this is something we'll discuss next class, okay? So this is why you want to invest in Israel, for these 3 reasons. Why? Because they're going to keep on fighting wars to achieve the Greater Israel Project. Wars are profitable. Wars are the most profitable enterprise in the world, okay? Second is that they have to rebuild after all this destruction. So they need capital. And the third is they will control global trade because of the location, okay? So this is why Israel is a smart investment for transnational capital. I'm not talking about like us, okay, with like $1,000. I'm talking like trillions of dollars will probably go into Israel. All right, so to leave America, what you want is a stock market collapse, okay? An economic collapse. Why? Because economic collapse not only allows you to leave with as much money as possible, but also allows you to buy up distressed assets. And when I mean distressed assets, I mean resources, which include water, oil, okay? So you want to create as much damage as possible because then it's easier for you to buy up these resources. And okay, does that make sense? All right? So these guys plan decades ahead. But transnational capital, what they do is they're trying to create as much chaos as possible because in chaos, there's profit. Like if everyone's sitting around doing nothing, you can't make any money, okay? But if people are fighting each other, if there's blood on the streets, you can make a lot of money. All right? Does that make sense? Yeah. Okay. Any more questions, guys? Okay, so we'll talk about what happens after this financial shift next class, okay?